Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, allowing people to live in their cars. The City Council has voted unanimously to repeal the ban. How the decision affects the homeless crisis and affordable housing in San Diego. In 1 hour, President Trump will take to the podium to give his annual State of the Union address. We have local and national coverage. And after a few days of wet weather, the storm is on its way out. When we can expect clear skies again. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. It's no longer a crime in San Diego to live in your car. The City Council repealed a law today under pressure from a lawsuit. As KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen reports, a car could be a safer place option than the streets.
A group of disabled people sued the city in late 2017, arguing its ban on people living in cars was discriminatory. They said homeless shelters are sometimes unprepared to accommodate people's disabilities, and a car can be the safest and cleanest option for them. Last year, a federal judge ordered the city to stop writing tickets under the ban, saying enforcement was often arbitrary and the law was too vague. Ann Menashe is an attorney representing the plaintiffs. She says the law criminalized homelessness and punished the wrong people.
We're punishing students trying to better their lives. We're punishing human beings because they have disabilities, because they are poor. And more we are punishing people who are working full-time in this city but can't afford our skyrocketing rents.
City officials could try and rewrite the ordinance so it can pass legal muster, but council members gave no indication Tuesday of whether they would support that. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Today's vote was a victory for groups including Disability Rights California that sued to have city ordinance against living in the cars removed. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman spoke to a man who was directly affected.
Michael Bloom is one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit filed by Disability Rights California against the city of San Diego. In 2017, we caught up with Bloom, who had gotten a number of tickets for sleeping in his RV. Bloom used to park and sleep by the beach, but for the last month, a friend has been letting him stay on private property.
Being able to not have to move, oh man, it's like I died and went to heaven, you know? That's the intensity of the, violating some kind of infraction or something. It dominates a lot of your thinking.
But now Bloom isn't mobile.
Oh, man.
His camper broke down a few weeks ago.
I haven't gotten it running yet.
Bloom says he has not been ticketed for parking or sleeping in his RV for over a year. He used to constantly be on the move, trying to avoid tickets for sleeping in his camper.
You keep somebody from sleeping, and man, they're in a whole world of crap. I mean, you know, God, it's like torture.
Bloom was planning to attend Tuesday's city council meeting. He wanted to tell the council one thing:
to try to make laws that are inclusive instead of break people.
Bloom relies on disability checks to get by every month and says he can't afford renting a place in San Diego. Work-related accidents years ago have made it hard for him to get around. He says he just wants to stay living in his RV, not having to worry about tickets.
As long as things are working the way they are, I mean, I'm happy. You know? I have a little bit of pain and stuff like that, but until I can't anymore, I love being able to be where I want to be at, you know.
When Bloom had to pay for tickets in the past, he says he often wouldn't have enough money for food or gas. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Today's wet weather is set to push out of the area and make way for sunshine. KPBS meteorologist Erin Calandra tells us when we can expect the change.
We are still seeing a wet pattern, but the good news is it is going to come to an end pretty soon. We do have a couple of showers still pushing in off the Pacific, pockets of downpours, and notice the pink over Mount Laguna. The highest elevation seeing a wintry mix and even some snow reported, about a half an inch to a couple of inches, depending on where you are. Here are some of the California rain totals. Blue Canyon, 1.5 inches of rain for Monday. So that's just for yesterday. And Burbank seeing about 0.65 inches. San Diego right in the middle, close to an inch. Now, again, that's just for yesterday. So that does not include what we have going on today. Here is our future cast through tonight and into tomorrow. We expect to see another half inch or so across San Diego. Other regions seeing a little bit more, a little bit less. Mount Laguna, not even a fraction here of precipitation is expected to continue. But we still have some issues as far as wintry weather across the mountains. So expect to see strong winds and that precipitation, those slick roadways will continue for travelers. So be careful and stay tuned. I will have full details on your forecasts coming right up.
We're not talking about games.
We're not doing a wall. Does anybody have any doubt that we're not doing a wall?
They're incredible job numbers, beyond anybody's expectations.
In less than an hour, President Donald Trump will deliver the State of the Union. This will be the first address for newly elected Democrats who won the House majority in November. That includes San Diego Congressman Mike Levin and his guest, a dreamer who attends UC San Diego, who spoke a short time ago about what they expect tonight.
Well, I am going to approach the State of the Union tonight with an open mind, and I'm very pleased to hear the President speak of unity. I think the key is whether or not the reality will match that rhetoric. And if the President wants to show unity, he has a great opportunity in the next 2 weeks to reach across the aisle and to work with Democrats so that we don't have to do another shutdown, another time without pay for our Coast Guard and our air traffic controllers and other federal employees who are impacted.
I hope that he talks about that positively and talks about having to work with people and not just a hateful rhetoric about all immigrants. So that's one of my major issues is environmental science, fighting climate change, and that's one of the main reasons that I decided to work with Mike Levin, because he was this big environmental champion, and that was something that was really important to me. That, along with women's rights, gun control, going to UCSD, that's a major issue sometimes to talk about with students, and you don't want to live in fear of your safety in that sense.
This year's State of the Union address comes a week later than expected. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi delayed the event due to the government shutdown. UC San Diego political science professor Thad Kauser says the recent political decision will play a role in how the president delivers his speech.
Well, I think for President Trump, who has just faced the jarring blow of losing on a shutdown, this is his biggest chance to make a case to the American people to lay the foundation for either a deal, which seems unlikely, or a national emergency that he may declare to start construction on a wall. So I don't think he's speaking to Nancy Pelosi and to Democrats who are going to be out in the chamber in front of him. I think he's going to be speaking to the cameras, the American people, and trying to restore his image and trying to make a broader pitch. We never have any idea what to expect from this president. So will his approach be the traditional tone of someone sort of using elevated presidential language, or will we see more someone who looks like he's talking to a campaign rally? That's where Donald Trump has been most effective, and so we're not quite sure what he thinks will work best for him in this speech.
California's Attorney General has launched dozens of legal fights over Trump policies. Tonight, Javier Becerra will be on the national stage when he delivers the Spanish language rebuttal to the State of the Union. Becerra's speech will be broadcast on Spanish language TV and radio, which has an estimated audience of 100 million people.
If he's planning to move forward with ideas that are bipartisan, that can be done in Congress, great. California and the rest of the nation are waiting for this federal government to finally do things other than shut down. We need to move forward. Americans want to work. We're proving that despite the dysfunction in Washington, D.C., we can get a lot done. I believe that there's an opportunity to really achieve things for the public in a bipartisan fashion. We've seen already how on many of these votes, Republicans and Democrats have passed measures. It's the president who's the obstacle.
What President Trump says tonight on immigration will be closely watched. KQED Newsroom's Thuy Vu talked with Scott Schaefer and Lonnie Chin about what's at stake.
He's giving this speech amid looming tensions over keeping the government open, over the border wall, over the Russia investigation. Amid that backdrop, how confident are you that he will be able to deliver a unifying message, which is what he's vowing to do?
Well, it wouldn't be consistent with what he's been like so far as president. I would think there's two different pathways he can take with this speech. One is to look to issues where there is common ground with Democrats: prescription drug pricing, infrastructure reform. These are areas where the Democrats would potentially work with the president, or he can go to the issues that his base cares about, like immigration. And so far, that's been his play. That's been where he's been most comfortable. And frankly, the politics of this dictate, I think, a speech that's less unifying. As he thinks about 2020 and his reelection campaign, he really needs to consolidate that base. And the issues that will consolidate that base are not the same issues that Democrats are going to want to talk about in terms of working together with Republicans.
I would agree. I mean, I don't think he's ever really tried to unify. I mean, if you go back to his inaugural address, it was very dystopian, focusing on crime and how the middle class, very dark. And so that seems to be his only play in his playbook. I don't think he's tried to really reach very far beyond his base, but I agree that he could. And I am also going to be looking for how does he treat Nancy Pelosi? Does he call her Madam Speaker, or is it Nancy? You know, he could be gracious and sort of extend an olive branch, but that's just not in his nature. Well, maybe he'll, you know, have a new play for the State of the Union, but we just haven't seen that.
Immigration is a very big issue in California. It's a key issue for him. And among those in the audience will be an undocumented immigrant who worked at one of his golf courses. She was invited by a Democratic Congresswoman. Scott, how will that affect any message that the president delivers on immigration and border security and protecting jobs for Americans?
You know, it reminds me of what Steve Bannon did during one of the debates with Hillary Clinton, where he brought some of these women that had accused Clinton of sexual assault to the debate. You know, it's kind of a distraction. I think it's meant to kind of throw him off of his game a little bit. But I think that the concern that Democrats have, and some Republicans, frankly, is that he's going to declare a national emergency in the speech and therefore try to go around Congress to get the money from the Pentagon or other places in the budget to build this wall. But, you know, I think that there is a way to talk about a wall of security that would include fencing and technology and beefing up the public border access points and the Coast Guard. But, you know, I think that things like inviting somebody who was an undocumented worker that got, I think, fired from his company is really not going to help.
It'll be interesting to see the tone and approach the president takes to immigration, because recall, this is happening while the congressional committee that was convened after the shutdown to discuss immigration policy is continuing its deliberation. The president can set the tone for where that committee goes. He's already tweeted, by the way, that it almost doesn't matter. He thinks it's a waste of time what this committee does, which suggests that he's already got his mind made up.
Well, he told the New York Times he's going to build that wall anyway. So do you think he will declare a national emergency?
I think that's the most likely outcome at this point. I mean, it's unlikely. Look, this committee that's been formed to discuss immigration is made up of people who are relatively moderate overall on immigration. You don't have a lot of hardliners. So even if they come to some really fabulous agreement that, let's say, 80% of Americans would agree on, is that committee going to be able to get agreement from the hardline Democrats and the very conservative Republicans and President Trump? It's unlikely. So the outcome we're going to end up with, I don't think, is another shutdown, because nobody wants that to happen. What we're going to end up with is President Trump exercising unilateral authority.
The State of the Union address will be delivered tonight at 6. PBS NewsHour will have coverage and analysis on television. NPR coverage will be carried on KPBS FM.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump delivers his State of the Union address after the longest government shutdown, and no deal yet in sight for a border wall. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Poway Mayor Steve Voss is proposing using city funds to build flats. The affordable housing program is called Homes, Home on My Extra Space. It would pay for building granny flats on private property. As an incentive, the city would then split the rent money with the homeowner. The mayor is presenting the plan to the city council tonight. It will need to approve this plan before the pilot program can be rolled out. Now let's toss it back over to meteorologist Erin Calandra for tonight's full forecast.
Good evening. Well, that umbrella, it is still going to be pretty handy through tonight, but then we get a break in this wet weather. Taking a look at the big picture, we have a lot of precipitation coming in right along the coast of California, the interior areas. Well, they're seeing some snow. Here's a closer look at San Diego County. You can see pockets of downpours. That's the yellow that you see moving across the screen, but the pinks and also the blues right across the mountains, well, that's where we are seeing a wintry mix, some snow dropping. These rain totals, they're for yesterday alone, so it does not include what we received today, but across San Diego County, close to an inch. So isolated flooding to Tehachapi, about 1.5 inches, and Burbank, less than an inch. And we do have concerns tonight for that snow threat across the mountains. It's going to be pretty slippery for travelers, gusty conditions as well. Here's our futurecast starting around 7 o'clock tonight. Notice another batch of rain moving in right around 8:30 or so. And that snow, it is really going to come down overnight. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Mount Laguna, you're going to be getting hit. San Diego, expect to see that wet weather. Another ½ inch of rain is expected across San Diego through tonight and into tomorrow. Temperatures are cold too. Yikes, down to 46 degrees for our low. So that's below our average, and that's the case for everyone here across the county. Ramona at 33 and Borrego Springs at 40 degrees. Now tomorrow it dries out, but we're going to have that cold air rushing down from the north. So our temperatures are going to stick a couple degrees cooler than normal. We should be at 65 in San Diego this time of year, but we'll only reach 57 for the high. That means much of the day it's going to be colder than that, but we will have the sunshine, and that's going to feel pretty good. Borrego Springs at 59 for the high. We will dry out by the end of this week. Some sunshine, that is until the weekend. That's when we expect to see more showers rolling through. So pretty nice through Friday. Showers expected again on Saturday for pretty much everyone. That's the case inland. Temperatures will be mainly in the 60s until the weekend. That's when we dip to the 50s. In the mountains, we'll be in the 30s and 40s with sunny skies. And in the deserts, expect temperatures to mainly be in the 60s. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra.
Weather forecasters are using a new system to measure these weather patterns that are bringing so much rain to Southern California. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson explains how it all works.
Much of the rain that drenched San Diego is coming to the region on an atmospheric river, which brings storms here. Now, the Pineapple Express is one that famously drags moisture from the central Pacific to Southern California. Scripps Institution of Oceanography meteorologist Marty Ralph has led the development of a new tool to help measure the impact of those atmospheric rivers. And Ralph says the scale looks at 3 variables: water vapor, winds, and storm speed. The systems can vary greatly, and knowing that will help forecasters.
At a given moment in time, there are typically 3 or 4 of these somewhere in the northern hemisphere, and they're spread out. They're very small, relative to the global scale, and yet they produce about 90% or more of all the water vapor transport in the mid-latitudes, is in these few filaments or rivers in the sky.
The new system ranks the rivers in 5 categories, from the most beneficial to the most damaging. National Weather Service forecasters are already using the scale. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
It's been a hard winter for the Midwest and the East Coast, bringing heavy ice and snow to the regions. One resort in New Hampshire, though, isn't wasting the frost. Associated Press reporter Warren Levinston explains the tradition.
When the ice on Squam Lake in New Hampshire is at least 12 inches thick, workers at a rustic resort gather to take part in a winter tradition that's more than 120 years old. They harvest ice so that in the summer, guests of Rocky Wall Deep Haven camps can cool their water, soda, and beer bottles not in refrigerators, but in antique ice boxes.
Over on this side right here is where people can put their beverages.
It's one of only a handful of places in the country practicing the ritual for commercial purposes.
The camp's been around since 1897, and many of the families have been coming for generations. And people here who come here don't like to see much change. They like it to be a simple, quiet place, kind of like going back in time.
Ice harvesting from frozen lakes was a big business in the 19th century, but 20th century refrigeration techniques mostly killed it off. Home refrigerators and freezers started replacing ice boxes in the years after World War I. But at this resort, staffers and volunteers can harvest 200 tons of ice over several days in a typical winter. They load it into storage facilities until guests arrive for the summer season.
They set up everything yesterday, the ramp. Today we cut out the chute, and the big saw you see there cuts out 16 by 19-inch blocks. That it doesn't cut all the way through. We leave about an inch, inch and a half. So when we're ready to take the blocks out, we just pry them apart gently and then float the blocks down this channel to the bottom of the ramp, where I usually am the hooker. You grab this hook, you grab 5 blocks of ice at a time, and a winch helps me push the 5 blocks up, slides on the top of the ramp and into the back of the truck.
When it's all done, the group collects as many as 3,600 blocks of ice.
Obviously, spending this time and energy, we wouldn't have to do it. We could buy for blocks of ice. But there's something about the pride, I think, that this place has in still being the place that still maintains that culture, that tradition. It's tradition.
Warren Levinson, Associated Press.
Birds of prey are usually seen from afar, but at the Carolina Raptor Center in Huntsville, North Carolina, visitors can be up close and engaged with the birds in the natural world. Reporter Frank Graff shows us why this unique experience is so important.
This is our red-legged Seriama, and his name is Yaya. He's a gentle giant. He's very curious about everything.
To understand the mission of the Carolina Raptor Center, you've got to meet Yaya.
So, and what we've done is we've trained him to follow along with us. So we have these sticks that have a tennis ball attached to them, and when we present them down to the ground, he knows to run up towards the target stick. And after he does that, we bridge him, so we say good, which is just marking the behavior that we want him to do, and then we give him a food reinforcement. So we mix it up. Sometimes he gets berries, sometimes he gets super worms, things he would naturally eat out in the wild.
Oh, I can't let you do that. And it's important to not only meet Yaya, the center hopes you have what it calls a nose-to-beak encounter with him.
You're so beautiful. Oh my gosh. This is a great thing that we can do. We can introduce him to visitors.
Yeah. He's just so curious. He's like, those people look familiar. I'm going to come see him again.
I like his little crest. So this is exactly why we have a bird like him, so we can get him out really close to people, because that really close experience is what makes it so special and makes people really care about these birds. We want to get them in front of people, so that's a whole training part, getting them used to people, not being nervous when they're in front of a group of people, and then we would love to show something that they would do in the wild.
Yaya was born at another avian park and given to the Raptor Center. He's one of 85 birds who are permanent residents.
A lot of people just don't know that birds have their own experiences. They have their own personality. You don't normally think about that. And I think it's just because we see them so much from a distance. And a lot of our job here is showing that off to people.
The center's mission includes environmental education and environmental stewardship. It's believed that is best accomplished by getting people as close to birds as possible, whether on display or trained.
He is actually so far along in his training that I can voluntarily check his feet. So I'll just give him a reward first, and then I'll just slightly pick up one of his feet and check it. Good.
We train our birds to show off a lot of their natural behaviors, to show people and get them up close, to have these really great nose-to-beak experiences with them, so they can really learn a lot about their environment and feel empowered to go out and do something for the natural world. But we can also use training to help us on our husbandry side of things. So we can train them to go to a scale to get weights on them, to get health indicators. There's a lot we can do just to overall improve their lives.
This is a typical chart of a barred owl. So he came in 27 days ago. Barred owl is a very common bird that we see around here, and here's an x-ray.
The mission also includes the rehabilitation of injured and orphaned raptors. The medical center treats about 1,000 birds every year. About 70% of those are released back into the wild.
And in this case, you can see this poor guy has 2 broken shin bones. Tibia tarsus, he probably got clipped by the hood of a car. And he's actually a real trooper. Could you imagine having 2 broken legs? And here he is 2 weeks later with bright white steel implants in both legs. We repaired both bones on separate days because it'd be pretty hard on him if we did them all at once. And he's doing quite well. He's actually starting to stand on those legs. And if all goes well, we'll be removing those implants in about, 3.5 more weeks. He'll be with us for a while to recuperate and to get back into flight shape and all that thing. But he's healing quite well.
And that brings us back to Yaya.
Their habitat is grassland, so he's probably looking at that like, this is perfect.
About half of the center's resident birds are brought out for education. Yaya seems happy about his job. So if you hold out your stick here, that's the signal to come over
so
here.
He is supposed to touch his beak on the tennis ball, and then he'll get his reward.
So if I'm standing here, is that's going to throw things off, or will that?
I don't think so.
No, let's try.
Yeah. He's a little interested in other things right now. Good.
And then you reward the behavior.
Okay. So the good is our bridge, so that lets him know that that's what we wanted. As soon as he touched his beak to the tennis ball, I bridged and then gave him the reward, which is a superworm.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.